first of all, I'd like to thank everybody who is watching today. This is Walk Through the Psalms Week 10. I want to thank you for joining us, those of you who are joining us live. In case you don't know, I'm Penina Taylor. And before we actually start the class, I want to talk about just a couple of things because, first of all, it's a short class today. It probably will take 25 minutes about. And then I'm going to allow some time for some chatting or discussion afterwards. But part of the reason that the class is very short is because this has been a very distracting week. I am here in Israel and giving the class from Israel. And if you are watching this around the time that it's been recorded, of course it's recording, so it could be much, much later. But if you're watching this around the time that we've recorded it, then you know that this week has been a very active week for terrorism in Israel, and everybody is anxious. Everybody is feeling some level of fear and concern for their own lives and their families' lives here in Israel. So if this is still going on and you're watching, well, even if it's not still going on, if you're a person who prays, please keep us in mind here in Israel. Please keep us in your prayers. There's a lot going on that we don't understand. And in fact, part of what we're doing is this evening, after I give this webinar, I'm going to be giving a class on dealing with fear. So anybody who is watching this now is welcome to join us in about an hour after this class is over for a webinar on what I call broadcasting, which is a technique that can be used to deal with fear and to gain a sense of control over one's life. I don't know that it's necessarily as effective as some other techniques for getting rid of high levels of anxiety, but it is a technique that I find has helped me to be able to gain control over many aspects of my life, including that of feeling a victim and of being full of fear. So that's what we're going to be doing later on this evening. If you are watching this by recording and fear is something for you that is an issue and you would like to take a look at that, the video is called Broadcasting, and I will make it open to the public on my YouTube channel, so you can just go there and look for it. And perhaps I'll also post the link below on this video after it's recorded, because this is being recorded first. But anyway, so it's interesting that this is the subject that this is what's going on right now. So as I said, we're in the midst of this wave of terror that's going on in Israel. And the reason that it is very interesting is, you know, some of my commentary, first of all, today on the Psalms, is going to be very relevant to what's going on. Now, if you're watching this video and you are not pro-Israel, I just want to warn you that some of the commentary that I'm going to be given, because the two Psalms that we're going to look at today really have a lot of relevance for those of us in Israel who are experiencing this increased terror. So today's commentary may be a little politically charged. So if you're not a supporter of Israel, and which I can't imagine somebody listening to one of my classes wouldn't be, but if you are not a supporter of Israel and her right to exist and her right to exist in peace, you may want to skip today's class. Not that it's a political class, but I do make some relevant comments. So you have been warned. Consider yourself warned. Okay. Today, we're looking at Psalms 12, Mizmor Yud Bet, and Psalm 13, Mizmor Yud Gimel. This psalm, Psalm 12, like many of the Psalms, is a plea from David to God to act on behalf of those who are being taken advantage of. David's confidence in God's faithfulness to act justly and to make things right is once again highlighted here. Okay? Now, we have a very, very simple PowerPoint presentation, so it's just going to basically have the psalm for you, but I wanted to make sure that you had that available to look at, because not everybody necessarily comes equipped to come to the class with a book in front of you. And I have heard the requests, by the way, to do worksheets to accompany the videos, and I actually made one for last week and forgot to send it out with the with the email. So if you message me, I'd be happy to send you the worksheet that you can watch, especially if you plan on watching last week's video again. You know, some people go over the videos a few times, and so that way you have a place to actually take your notes with some questions in there. And I would love to have your feedback on what you think about the way I did it, any suggestions for improvement. And yes, so definitely let me know that, okay? So again, this psalm begins with an introduction, okay? So therefore, this is one of those psalms where the numbering system, the numbering between the Jewish translations and the Christian translations are going to be off by one verse, all right? So let's look now at Psalm 12. It starts with, for the conductor on the Sheminit, a song of David. Save, O Lord, for the pious are gone, for the faithful have vanished from the sons of men. One speaks to another with falseness, smooth talk. They speak with a double heart. May the Lord cut off all smooth lips, the tongue that speaks great things. Who said, with our tongue we will overpower? Our lips are with us. Who is Lord over us? Because of the plunder of the poor, because of the cry of the needy, now I will arise, the Lord shall say. I will grant them salvation. He shall speak concerning them. The sayings of the Lord are pure sayings, like silver refined, exposed to the earth, clarified sevenfold. You, O Lord, shall guard them. You shall guard him from this generation forever. Wicked men walk on all sides when the basest to the sons of men is elevated. Okay, so that's the first psalm that we're going to look at tonight. And some of you can probably already see where there's relevance to today's situation, not only in Israel, but in the whole world. So we're going to take a look at that just a little bit. Okay? So let's walk through this psalm. Verse 1 says, for the conductor on the Sheminit, a song of David. Now, if you'll recall from our discussion on Psalm 6, the number of strings on the instrument being played to accompany the psalm has significance to the meaning of the song. This psalm was to be played on the Sheminit, which is an 8-stringed instrument. And the sages have explained the significance to the number of strings on the instrument and the theme of the psalm that it accompanied. So the Maharal and Rabbi Hirsch discuss in many of their writings the significance of the numbers 6, 7, 8, and 10 regarding the strings on the instruments that are accompanying the psalms or the Tehillim. Okay, 6 symbolizes a cube, which is a 3-dimensional unit covered from all sides, and it represents the total perfection of this physical world, which, if you'll recall correctly from this week's Parsha, obviously I'm dating the video now, but we just finished the first Parsha of the year, Parshat Bereshit, and we're about to launch into the second Parsha, Parshat Noah. But so if you'll recall, you know, we always say the world was created in 7 days. Well, the world wasn't created in 7 days. According to the Bible, the world was created in 6 days, and on the 7th day, what happened? God rested, right? So 6 represents the creation of the physical world. 7 always indicates the divine element connected with the physical world of creation. Okay, it relates to Shabbat, the day of rest, the 7th day. 8, however, represents the release from this world, redemption from all bodily and moral ills, and resurrection from the physical decay. Right? It harkens to a future time when the Messiah will loosen the bonds which shackle us to this world. This is one reason why circumcision is performed on the 8th day, teaching us that part of the covenant we have with God requires us to ascend beyond the physical pleasures of this world. And anytime we see the Sheminit, the 8-stringed instrument, listed in one of the Psalms, we know that there is some sort of an allusion, some sort of a reference, even if it's oblique, to the Messianic era, the time when we are no longer going to suffer the way that we do now. right? And there are debates between the Ramban and the Rambam, what's going to happen in the Messianic era, and the resurrection afterwards, when that's going to come, whether or not it's going to be a physical resurrection, whether it's going to be a spiritual resurrection. There's a lot of questions having to do with that. But the Sheminit instrument in particular is related to this Messianic era and the idea of being beyond the physical, basically the spiritual, but not just the spiritual of this world, the spiritual of reality, of the real spiritual realm. Okay, and lastly, the harp of 10 strings is reserved for the day when all the world will unite into one harmonious whole. That's, that final episode. I don't even really know how to explain it, but 10 represents total and complete unity. But this psalm is to be accompanied by the 8-stringed instrument. Okay. Normally, the harp used in the temple, by the way, was a 7-stringed harp, and it was held that the 8-stringed harp would be used when? In the Messianic era. The 10-stringed harp is to be used in the world to come. Okay, just a clarification, in Jewish thought, you have the Messianic era, which is a time when we'll all still be living on earth, but there's going to be a redemption of the earth and a perfecting of certain things that are not as they should be now. In fact, it will be the word that we use for the time when the Mashiach will come, which is Geula, right? A Goel is the Redeemer, and the Geula is the redemption. And the interesting thing is that the word Yeshua, which we translate as salvation, only ever means a physical rescue. But the word Geula actually means to turn things right way up. In other words, this world that we live in now is so upside down. There's so many things about it that just are not right, that just are not the way that they're supposed to be. But when the Messiah comes, everything will be made right. Now, what that means exactly, we can all debate. And there's plenty of ink spent in Jewish literature about the role that the Jewish people are going to play during the Messianic era, how we're going to be, of course, we see all throughout the book of Isaiah, Yeshayahu, we see reference to this end times when the Jewish people are going to be vindicated and we're going to take our rightful places as true lights to the nations and stuff like that. But anyway, so I totally lost track of where I was, so I will continue. The 10-stringed harp, right, was to be used in the world to come. So here, David is already alluding to the theme of this psalm being the release from the bonds of this world, as well as the inequity, that we see here. To David, the final redemption or time of the Messiah is the time of establishing true justice. Like I said, the Geula, setting things right. I'm almost 100% convinced that King David was a Libra. I don't know what the traditional birthday of King David was, but I am pretty well convinced that he was a Libra, because the one theme that we see traveling throughout all of the Psalms is this idea of God being just and the justice, and everything in the end, even if we can't see it, is going to turn out the way it's supposed to be. And you have this underlying theme that even though things are bad, it's the way it's supposed to be. Whatever's happening is because God knows and he is in control, and we only have limited information. And so to us, it seems bad, even if it's not. So this psalm, it says, is to be accompanied by the instrument which represents the coming of the Messiah. And we need to keep that in mind. Okay, verse 2. Save, O Lord, for the pious are gone. The faithful have vanished from the sons of men. All right, now, the word translated as save is the word Hoshea, which comes from the word Yeshua, which I already mentioned means salvation. It means a physical rescue. And this is David's request that God put an end to the world as we know it. Not to destroy the world, but to basically bring about the end of the corruption and wickedness that seems to prevail. He's saying, enough. The time is up, Lord. There's no one left who's pious. There's no one who is faithful. Now, in Judaism, it's understood that the final redemption can come about in one of two ways. And we get this because there seem to be some conflicting verses that are pointing to this end times, but they don't quite match up. So we understand in Jewish thought that there are two ways that the Messiah could come, the redemption could come. Either the Jewish people can get our collective acts together and merit the redemption, bringing about the coming of the Messiah, which some of us have our doubts is going to happen. But anyway, not only sooner rather than later, but as a majestic king arriving on a cloud and without a whole lot of bloodshed or tragedy. The jury's still out about whether that's going to happen or not. The second way is that we can end up doing what we've been doing until now, until we run out of time, and God decides that if he doesn't rescue us, we're going to finally completely destroy ourselves. In this scenario, the Messiah is arriving in a humble manner, being crowned king after a long and bloody battle that kills off a significant percentage of the population of the earth. Now, I am not a doom and gloom kind of person. I am not a conspiracy theorist kind of person. I don't even like it when people try to guess whether or not, I have friends and family who will say, oh, we know the Messiah is here soon because look at this and look at that. It's the beginning of the war of Gog and Magog, and they're all into end time stuff. And I'm just like, you know what? God has given me a calling and I have a life to live today. So I'm not really into, is this going to happen this way or is this going to happen that way? But certainly it does seem to me like we're headed towards the second option because of all of the terrible threats that seem to be existing in the world. And, it's funny, I'm teaching this class on fear tonight, but if you were to ask me what's the one thing that makes me most afraid, I would have to say, what the world is going to be like during that last battle that's going to bring about the Mashiach. So I'm still hoping for a majestic Messiah arriving on a cloud because we got our act together and we did what we were supposed to do. But I'm not 100% sure it's going to happen that way. All right, back to our psalm. So it almost sounds as if David is saying here, look, we have run out of time. Which is funny because that was a long time ago, right? He's saying there, which is why it's applicable, very applicable to us today. So he says there is no way for things to turn around. There aren't even any righteous people left on earth. By the way, some of the sages and commentators have said that this is actually a prophetic psalm, that David is kind of talking about what's going to happen in the future, not necessarily about the time that he lived in, but he's basically talking about a time in the future when there is not a single righteous person left on earth, or at least it seems that way in some way. Poetry, which is what the Psalms are, can sometimes exaggerate, use hyperbole, that means to exaggerate, because of the poetical form. And we've already talked several times about how many of these phrases have more than one way to be translated, okay? But anyway, so David is saying, like, we've run out of time. There's no way for things to turn around. There aren't even any righteous people left on earth. Please, God, just go ahead and send the Messiah and put us out of our misery. Have you ever looked around and thought to yourself, the world has gone mad? I've been thinking that this week. Stark raving mad. Enough is enough already. Please, God, rescue us from ourselves before we completely destroy ourselves. I certainly have, as you can tell by the passion in my voice. And here, David is. This is what David is saying. Please, God, rescue us from ourselves. All right, verse 3. One speaks to another with falseness, smooth talk. They speak with a double heart. When David was running from his son Absalom, who was trying to steal the throne from him before he actually died, so that Solomon wouldn't be his successor. Because think about it, right? Solomon was supposed to succeed David, and everybody knew that. So David dies, Solomon gets the throne. But if Absalom succeeds in stealing the throne from his father, then he can preempt Solomon. Did I say Absalom? If Absalom succeeds in stealing the throne from his father, then he can preempt Solomon taking the throne and he could hold on to the throne. So Clearly, that's what he had his eyes on. He had his eyes on the throne, right? So one of the tactics Absalom used to try to destroy his father was by spreading lies about David. It says in 2 Samuel chapter 15 that Absalom would get up early and stand on the road to the gate of the city. And as people would pass by who appeared to have a case to bring to the king, Absalom would ask them where they're from. When they said they were from Israel, he would tell them that they have no advocate in the court of the king. Basically, there is no justice in King David's court for you. But if I were king, says Absalom, then there would be real justice. And so the passage goes on to tell us that through his lies and flattery, Absalom won the hearts of the men of Israel. In addition, it seems that Absalom's entire scheme to overthrow the king was characterized by lies and character defamation. So David was particularly sensitive to people speaking lies, and we've seen this already in several of the Psalms that clearly refer to this time. That he talks about how they accused him of things that he didn't do, and it seemed like they were totally trying to destroy his reputation. All right, so this comes up again and again and again in reference to the wicked, this idea of speaking lies. Here, David is saying that pretty much everyone on earth is lying and flattering, and no one tells the truth. This is one of the symptoms of a completely corrupt world that desperately needs the Messiah and needs him now. Growing up, I was a bit of an idealistic child. I thought that newspapers and news programs were devoted to getting the truth out, no matter how inconvenient. Well, I have since learned that this is not the case, and that facts are only reported in a way that supports whatever the agenda is of the given organization. Over and over again, I am amazed at how the media posts outright lies. They must know that what they're doing. There's no way that this can be a mistake. Someone posted a copy yesterday, I think it was, of a piece from the LA Times. It bemoaned the fact that so many Palestinian teenagers have been killed in the wake of rising Middle East violence. Not once did the article mention that these teenagers were all killed in the process of trying to kill Israelis. They make it sound like, Israeli soldiers are just walking the streets looking for Arabs to shoot down. No one bemoaned the culture that sends its children out to get themselves killed in order to accomplish their political agenda. Nope. Horrible Israelis. How dare they kill so many Arab children as part of their occupation? Right? So David's words seem very fitting for the world situation right now. Evil people are committing terrible acts of violence, not just in Israel, but all over the world. And it's pretty much affecting every country and people. In Middle Eastern countries where there are no Jews, the Christians are being targeted, and they're lying about what's happening. And the media, either through outright lies or simple omission of facts and events, are lying about it all. It's crazy. The world has been flipped on its head. We have an expression in Israel, in Hebrew, and you say, it's hafuch, it's upside down. It seems like there's almost no one left on earth who is honest, who can be trusted. Everyone's words are suspect as they speak with a double heart, as David says. Okay, verses 4 and 5. May the Lord cut off all smooth lips, the tongue that speaks great things. Who said, with our tongue we will overpower? Our lips are with us. Who is Lord over us? David's prayer here is addressing those who use both external communication and internal communication. Now, according to the Malbim, the word used in the first phrase of the verse, which is translated as lips, the word is spatayim, always speaks of that external communication. In other words, speech. Whereas the word translated here as tongue, lashon, refers to internal speech, the thoughts that are between man and his maker, matters of philosophy and faith. So it's interesting to note that the sin of Lashon Hara, or Lashon Hara, depending on where you're from, is referred to by the sages as gedolot, as great things, because of the huge effect that such negative speech has on others and its ability not only to destroy the lives of those who are the subject of it, but the soul of those who are perpetrating it. In fact, that's why, although the act of Lashon Hara is a physical act, and we would think that it would be, and we would think that it should then use the word spatayim, it uses the word lashon to emphasize the huge internal aspect of this grave sin. The actual negative speech is only the manifestation of a greater internal issue. When a person has a problem speaking Lashon Hara, it's not just that they have a problem controlling their mouth. There's something going on inside, a battle. And this is why the struggle to overcome speaking negatively about others is a huge battle, and it's not easily won. David is asking God not only to get rid of those who speak lies, but those who engage in Lashon Hara, internal and external, the spiritual reality that creates evil in this world. He continues by asking the question, who said, with our tongue we will overpower, our lips are with us, who is Lord over us? In essence, in that one sentence, the wicked person admits to the struggle and the tremendous power of the internal, which speaks to the very essence of who a person is. Thinking himself accountable to no one, the wicked person believes in himself and his own power to overcome all that are weaker than himself. Do you remember last week we heard about this idea of the wicked person questioning, where is God? And basically saying, there is no God, because if there was a God, he would challenge me on my statement that there is no God. Therefore, there must not be a God. And it's reinforced by the fact that the wicked is successful. Okay? So here we have a similar scenario. His external words, the lies he spreads, accomplish the work for him and simply reinforce what he already believes to be true, that he is invincible and that there is no God to whom he must give an account. Verses 6-8. Because of the plunder of the poor, because of the cry of the needy, now I will rise. The Lord shall say, I will grant them salvation. He shall speak concerning them. The sayings of the Lord are pure sayings, like silver refined, exposed to the earth, clarified sevenfold. You, O Lord, shall guard them. You shall guard him from this generation forever. As we saw in the previous psalm, when the needy and the poor cry out, God intervenes and rescues them. Again, why does God wait until we call? Because he created us for the purpose of having a relationship with us. And if he always acted on our behalf without us first calling out to him, we might begin to think that there is no God, that we accomplish a great life all by ourselves and within our own power. And we would become just like the wicked that David speaks of, whose internal speech is falsehood, whose faith and philosophy is falsehood. David says that God's promise to act is pure and there is no flaw found in them. If God says he will do something, unlike those who lie in order to get what they want, God is faithful and his word like pure refined silver. Indeed, says David, you will take care of them and you will protect those that call out to you. We might ask the question, we asked the question last week, why does God wait until the poor and the needy cry out before he acts? And again, as I just reiterated, I believe that it has to do with the fact that he wants to be in a relationship with us, and that if he didn't allow us to first feel the need and the pain and the loss, we would never come to him. So then the question could be asked, all this stuff that's happening in Israel and in the world today, do you know, the terrorists are simply tools in the hand of God. Sounds terrible, I know. This idea that like God is actually approving of these things. Well, I wouldn't say that he's approving of them, but he's allowing them to happen in order to bring about some other end. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is it? I mean, we can't answer the question because we're limited in our knowledge. And I think it's a crime when people try to say that certain terrible things happened for a specific reason. For example, when somebody says, that typhoon happened in this country because they spoke against Israel, or that hurricane happened, or that earthquake happened because they did this, because they did that, because of homosexuality, because the women don't dress modestly, you name it, whatever reason that people try to give, it's a crime. It's an absolute crime to try to think that we can even begin to guess what God has in mind and why these things happened. But it should, when they happen to us, spur us on to ask the question, what do I need to do? What is this message trying to get me to do? Do I need to pray more? Do I need to think better of my fellow Jews or my fellow man? Do I need to be more appreciative of what I have? Do we need more unity? Well, we always need more unity. But the question is, God is allowing this bad thing to happen in my life because something needs to be accomplished from it. It's not just to make me suffer. God does not give us difficult times just purely to suffer. He doesn't want his children to suffer. That's not the way that God works, even though there are some religions who might imply that that he does. Okay. But so we have to stop and it really should give us pause to ask, okay, what do we need to do? When it comes to the state of Israel, it could be all of the disunity. It could be that in general, Jews are not talking to God enough. It could be that the government needs to ignore what the rest of the world is saying and just do what is right. I mean, we could, like I said, it would be a crime to even begin to guess, but we can ask God to give us some clarity, some insight on what part we need to do to help bring about this redemption, to help bring about him drawing closer to us and showing his presence in a way that's more tangible. All right, now the chapter ends with a very curious verse. It would have made sense to have ended the chapter here, right, on a good note, because how did it end? Let's see. Here we go. You, O Lord, shall guard them. You, O Lord, shall guard them. You shall guard him from this generation forever. Okay? So that would be a good place to stop, right? That would be a great way to end the psalm. But it doesn't end that way. How does it end? For some reason, David saw fit to end the chapter by going back basically to what he put forth in the beginning of the psalm. It reads, wicked men walk on all sides when, and then there's, because of commentaries, they added one who appears, but I'm leaving it out because that's not in the actual translation. Wicked men walk on all sides when the basest to the sons of men is elevated. When society worships the person with the most power, no matter how corrupt, no matter how much evil he had to perpetrate in order to get that power, it is then that the wicked will simply take over and run things. If the wicked are in charge, the world is about to self-destruct, and we desperately need God to intervene and bring Messiah. So again, doesn't that feel like today? Certainly we feel that way here in Israel. We shake our heads and we ask, how is it that evil men can wield so much power that even the government seems incapable of stopping it? The wicked men are walking on all sides. Many believe that it's because Israel herself has allowed world pressure, I started to talk about that a little bit, to have more influence than simply doing what is right. But whatever the reason, much of the world feels like it is being overrun by evil. So according to David, we must all cry out to God, because it's only when we cry out to God with all our heart that he will intervene on our behalf. And just a reminder, since we're finishing up the psalm now, just a reminder that we don't always see the salvation that he brings about, the rescue that he brings about. We don't always see it in our own lifetime. and we don't always recognize it when it comes, So we've got to keep in mind that there's a bigger picture that we don't see. All right, now we're going to continue on to Psalm 13, where David continues on the theme of apparent abandonment of those in need and God's rescue when we cry out to him. The truth is that this psalm could be the prayer of pretty much each and every one of us. Suffering and challenges in life is the one common factor that we all share. Sure, some of us suffer more in some areas than others. Some of us have had terrible financial troubles, while others of us have suffered physical challenges and loss. Others of us have issues with our spouses or our children, what we call in Hebrew shalom bayit issues. All right, some have suffered tremendously in one area, while others of us struggle to a lesser degree, but in more areas. We all struggle, and we've all prayed at one time or another, "Where are you, God?" In this psalm, instead of speaking generically and globally, it is clear that David is specifically crying out on his own behalf. The psalm really requires little commentary, so I'm actually not going to give a whole lot. But let's take a look at it now, and then we'll sum it up in the end. To the conductor, a song of David. Again, because of that, the verses are off by one verse. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart by day? How long will my enemy have the upper hand over me? Can you identify with this? A lot of us can, right? This feeling of being just totally and completely abandoned and almost like there's no hope. Look and answer me, O Lord my God, enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. In other words, if you don't rescue me soon, I'm going to die. Lest my enemies say, I have overwhelmed him. My adversaries will rejoice when I totter. But I trusted in your loving kindness. My heart will rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord, for he has bestowed it upon me. So, like in the previous Psalms, David starts out by asking God not why he is hiding this time, but how long he will hide. Now, think about this for a minute. Have you ever felt ashamed by what you might consider a lack of faith? Perhaps you're wondering if you're the reason you can't feel God's presence in your life as you go through a difficult trial. And yet, it would seem that if you have, you are certainly in good company. David, the one person in history, or in the history of the Jewish people anyway, who attested to God's faithfulness and righteousness more than any other, also felt these feelings. It's part of the human experience. We are physical, finite, time-bound beings, and relating to a divine being, it's not so easy. Yeah, God gave us families so that we could have a physical picture of how to relate to God, but it's still not exactly the same, right? And sometimes we just don't feel God's presence, or even feel like he's deliberately holding us at arm's length. While it's uncomfortable, and it certainly is something we need to remedy, it is nothing to be ashamed of. What we need to do is learn how to use it as a catalyst for drawing near, because it's when we cry out to God with all our heart, and we open up our heart that way, we actually create the vessel for God to intervene in our life and for us to begin to feel his presence in a more tangible way. So, as we read these words and perhaps identify with them, we can say, like David in verse 6, which is how he ends this one, but I trusted in your loving kindness. My heart will rejoice in your salvation, and I will sing to Hashem, for he has dealt kindly with me. Isn't that a beautiful thought? I want to read that again because I really feel like it was fantastic that that's the note that we ended on, especially because we can so identify with this theme of wondering what on earth is going on in this world. And he says in the end, at first he starts out like, where are you, God? And he says, but I trusted in your loving kindness. My heart will rejoice in your salvation, and I will sing to Hashem, for he has dealt kindly to me. May we all be able to say this very, very soon. Let's trust in Hashem's loving kindness, rejoice in his salvation, and soon, please God, we will be singing to him, for the kind way that he has dealt with us all. I wanted to thank you so much for joining me this week as we walk through the Psalms. We walked through Psalm 12 and Psalm 13. I pray that we would all experience peace in the world this week, and that each of you would be protected and would know no sorrow. Again, if you've been getting a lot out of the Psalms, I would like to ask you to share it with other people. Let them know that we're doing it, and it's not too late to register. They can click on the link below, or you can click on the link below in order to register them. And I look forward to seeing you next week as we walk through the Psalms.